Hello and welcome to the circus.
Until the river for every day that I live and reaching the peak of my craft is my mission. Even if I don't succeed, and no strive, I still proceed to keep some of beats. You can believe that. For every day that I breathe, guaranteed that my speech is a bloodbath. Every time I write, that's blood in my hands. Bird rappers freely, you're the chicken Sam. Can barely rhyme. I'm really getting sick and tired of your jelly spine. Fucking lesson, taking up the shine. Anyone's nice with the right.
Welcome back to the Fantasy Football Joker, the regular episodes. Call them Friday Fundays, if you will. Thank you, as always, for joining. Please make sure that you go like, subscribe, comment, share the video, and as always, go sign up to fantasyfootballadviceforum.com. It is a fantastic grassroots community that we're building over there. There's all kinds of awesome creators that are joining, and you can get 10% off using my code Joker420. It's only $2.99 a month, only $28 a year. So make sure that you are going and signing up for that. Today we are going to be doing yet another best ball draft. Why not? It's the dead time of the season. The Pomeranian 2 went live today, so I had to jump on and record another best ball draft. I have been crushing as many of these underdog best ball drafts as I can. Ooh, and we have a delicious spot. I actually do not mind at all being at the 112, getting to double tap the picks. I enjoy that tremendously. So give us a lot of just casual time to relax and talk things over. While we're waiting for this to kick off, I wanted to talk about some general trade strategies. It's that time of year in dynasty leagues. A lot of trades are going down. So I just wanted to loosely discuss some of my favorite trade strategies that I use. Now, I will say trading the way that I do is not for the faint of heart. You tend to go big. I do really big trades a lot of times. Just recently, I did one that very many people disagreed with. Let me pull it up. Actually, I don't need to pull it up. I remember it was Derrick Henry, Justin Herbert. I was receiving. I sent out. Let me see. Brees Hall was the big piece there. No, I do have to look it up. Sorry about that, folks. The Fantasy Joker loves his 420, but it's always 420 somewhere. And my memory is not what it used to be. I started smoking when I was 16. I'm 33 now. You do the math. I don't feel like it. Let's go see here. So this was a team that I took over. For some reason, the owner just decided to up and leave. And I know people are out on Derrick Henry in Dynasty just in general because of his age. I think he's an exception to the rule. He's going to last at least 2 to 3 more seasons, in my opinion, as like a real legit starting running back. But Derrick Henry and Justin Herbert, I get in a super flex, and I send Deshaun Watson, Michael Pittman, Brees Hall, and a second round. So first of all, picks, when I send a pick, I do that just to juice my side and make it look nice. That second rounder is irrelevant ultimately to me. So to me, in my mind, I traded Deshaun Watson, Brees Hall, and Michael Pittman for Derrick Henry and Justin Herbert, because that team, I have Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs already stacked, and had some other pieces where I was like, oh, this is a win now team, so I'm just going to go for it this year. So a big long thing of saying that, go get your guys, Trojan horse it up a little bit, throw in a second round pick, a third round pick. That always juices the sides. I always think picks are ultimately irrelevant. Let's go pick our guys here. I've been double tapping Nick Chubb and Garrett Wilson at this position. First of all, I like building my roster in an even fashion to where I'm getting studs across all levels. But I think Nick Chubb is so obviously set up to be a number one running back in fantasy this season. And I think Garrett Wilson showed so much last year with so little from the quarterback position that with Aaron Rodgers, that's such a huge upgrade. So just Trojan horse is one of the things I do. Send a lot. I think a lot of people do that where they do the 3-for-1s and 2-for-1s kind of deals, but you have to really dress it up and make it look nice. And people are wise now to the 3-for-1, 2-for-1s. So one of the things I like to do now is 4-for-2 or 3-for-2, and I'll throw in a lot of times an underlier where it's like someone really bad on their roster that they're almost looking to get rid of that I'll just cut and grab someone off waivers. Or, if it's like a handcuff or something that fits my team, all the better. But I'll locate something like that on their roster to have be on their end so that when I'm sending back my deal, now it actually looks like a 3-for-2 as opposed to just I'm sending a bunch of stuff for their one player. Because I think people are definitely wise to that. Another thing I like to do is, in the same vein of the Trojan horse, is I'll send a really big deal, and then I'll also send a smaller deal, which is the deal that I actually want to go through. So let's say, for example, there's a team out there, and they've got 3 really good running backs, and one of them is like Miles Sanders, and they also have for whatever reason, let's just say they have Nick Chubb and Jonathan Taylor. So let's say somehow they had Nick Chubb already. They were able to trade for the 101. So they ended up with Chubb and Jonathan Taylor on the same team. Now they've got Miles Sanders too. They don't necessarily need him. The way that I would often trade for Miles Sanders is instead of going straight after Miles Sanders, which feels like whatever I ask for, they're going to then maybe counter and ask for more. A lot of times I'll try and trade for Nick Chubb or Jonathan Taylor. And then if that doesn't work out, I can come back to them and say, okay, well, I understand why you want to keep those 2 studs. Can you work a deal with me on Miles Sanders? And so now they're coming at it from a position of, okay, well, I didn't want to give up these guys. I still want to work a trade. Everybody at the end of the day, for the most part, likes trading. And when you're looking at the 3rd running back on their roster now, it's not the same as those 2 studs, but it's like secretly I wanted Miles Sanders from the start. So there's little psychological tricks like that you can use to get yourself an edge in the trade advantage. I'm not going to recap the whole board here. The whole first round was pretty standard. And then the whole second round too, there's nothing really out of place. Ramondre Stevenson, the news that Leonard Fournette might sign there has already driven him down a little bit, but he still went in the 3rd round. Mark Andrews went right after. Jalen Hurts, Amari Cooper, Breece Hall. And we're caught up. It's that easy. Trades. Another thing I do also is the low-level trades. I'm always looking for the low-level trades. So building a roster in Dynasty especially is not always about necessarily depth. It's what kind of depth. So, it's fine to have a handful of backup running backs that you think are going to hit. But I would rather, for sure, obviously have my handcuffs, but handcuffs extend to other positions. So if I have Mark Andrews and I have a handcuff running back and that person has Isaiah Likely and my handcuff running back matches one of their running backs, that's a trade I'm looking to make so that I can match up Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. Lots of little trades like that people don't always think of. They get overlooked, but they're very important. And this is just obvious. Najee Harris is my guy. So that's all day. Do we go bully running back here with Travis Etienne right there? No, I'm going to take an upside wide receiver. I do really like Drake London. I think he is going to lead the team in targets, even over Kyle Pitts, because Arthur Smith just hates fantasy football managers, and he's not going to let Kyle Pitts be good. He's going to ask him to block again. Oh, Kyle Pitts, you're a generational wide receiver? Please just go out and, block for me. That's it.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Like, I don't understand the coaching. It's like I was watching, so I'm working on a new series where I want to do like a very, like, it's like a series of shorts that would kind of like recap careers from football history from days past. When I say days past, I'm talking like before, most of us were even born. Like, I'm talking like 1970s and prior, like mid 70s prior. I'm looking at a lot of football legend. I've been watching the old top 100 tapes, and there was Tom Landry, maybe arguably one of the most systematic coaches in the history of football. When he had Tony Dorsett on his team, him and Tony Dorsett essentially had like an argument about Tony Dorsett was breaking the ball back across the play, and Coach Landry kept getting mad at him and said, "Look, there's in 100 out of 100 times when we face the Cardinals, there's no way that the play is going to break like that. So you need to stop doing it. You need to follow my play, essentially." And Tony Dorsett said to him, "Look, you drafted me to be a runner. Let me be a runner." Like, and he's saying essentially, like, let me use my vision, my natural instincts, and my talent to find where the holes are and where they are going to be, as opposed to just plug and play in your system. And basically, it happened exactly almost like Tony Dorsett described. He broke it back, took it to the house, and the next day, Tom Landry, again, very systematic, very regimented, very rigid head coach, legendary, came in the next day and basically said, "Look, offensive line, Tony Dorsett is a different type of running back, and you're going to have to just put on your hats and run and adjust, and he'll find the holes as he goes." So even someone as rigid as Tom Landry was able to recognize, and the best coaches are able to recognize, my scheme needs to adjust and fit the players on the field and not vice versa. It's not taking players and forcing square pegs into round holes. It's adapting and modifying a system around the existing personnel that you have to maximize their potential. That's really, at the end of the day, that's coaching 101. And that's what the best coaches do. And the coaches that don't do that usually inevitably end up not having the success that they would want at the NFL level. And so all that to say, I really hate what Arthur Smith has done with Kyle Pitts, and I'm not buying in on Kyle Pitts. However, he has shown a propensity to use the outside wide receiver, even back in his days with the Titans and with A.J. Brown. So I do like Drake London. We are about to be right back on the board here. I go going all Steelers. Oh, Deontay Johnson went right in front of me. So, we already spoke it into existence. Basically, we'll take Miles Sanders here because I do really like what I think he's going to do on the Panthers, and then I'll take Trevor Lawrence because he is the last elite quarterback option that I see on the board here. Because after Trevor Lawrence, that's where Deshaun Watson, if he comes back, but it's like if Voldemort can return to form and Avada Kedavra the league, then he would be also at that tier break. But after that, I don't understand Dak Prescott's ADP. Maybe it's just me. You look at last year, and I know he missed games, but the fact that he threw 15 interceptions in as few games as he did, they just had to restructure his contract for cap relief. I'm not feeling Dak this year. And it's weird because normally the Cowboys kind of bounce back and forth. They have, at least for as long as I've kind of been a fan. I feel like the Cowboys have always been like up one year, down the next. And we'll see what happens this year, but everything about the team, the whole Mike McCarthy, Brian Schottenheimer experience in 2023 is not something that I am thrilled or looking forward to. Especially you look at most of Tony Pollard's success last year came on outside zone schemes and like in relief of Zeke, who is the one doing a lot of that like bulk work. I think people misjudge too easily the grind of when you're having to carry in between the tackles. It's harder to then break that outside run in the third quarter when you've been in the game the whole time as the starter and having to play between tackles and take those 3-yard and cloud of dust type carries compared to when you're just coming in with fresh legs off the bench. And we've seen this in history where it's like, yeah, there's lots of running backs that can succeed with fresh legs coming off the bench, but can't necessarily carry the load through 4 quarters. And this is what gets back to the whole argument of should running backs be paid. And I think there is an argument to be made for the elite level running backs are doing 2 things. And they're carrying insane workloads that are unmatched in the NFL by any position except for the only person who touches the ball more than the running back is the quarterback. And it's, the quarterback's not getting hit on every single play, ideally anyways. So when you're talking about a single player getting 300 to 400 touches, and then a lot of times, you look at the Austin Ecklers of the world, the Alvin Kamara's of the world, they're just as much receivers and involved in the receiving game as they are running backs. But because they just happen to be tagged with that running back position, it's like what? So if Austin Eckler just becomes a slot receiver, then he gets paid what he should be paid. How does that make sense? Because he's ultimately, that's what he is. He is basically a slot receiver that can also play running back and vice versa. So, and Alvin Kamara is the same thing. So how do you handle guys in that mold? Really, it comes down to it's the same thing. I have a long form article ultimately that will come out. It may end up being, I was hoping it would be this week, but I have a different article on offensive lines that I think will be easier to get done. That'll be this week. This is more of a long form. I really want to put some time and effort into it, so it'll probably be actually next week. All of these articles, by the way, exclusive to fantasyfootballadviceforum.com. That's the only place that you can find my writing, which not to toot my own horn, but one of my actual skills in life is that I am a writer. That's what I've done most of my life, not just as a hobby, but I've won contests and I've written a screenplay. It's not like it's sold or anything, but I have the ability to do long form writings like that. I have done things like that in the past. So writing's kind of my thing. So If you want really whimsical, long form articles that you would not normally expect from like fantasy football stuff, and a lot of times it's not like analysis, like overbearing analysis or anything. A lot of it is very like, I make a lot of like analogies and draw comparisons to regular life and that kind of thing. I almost forgot that we're double up on the clock there. So we're done on running back, basically. I took James Conner because the value there is just too good to ignore. And I love getting this running back room. This is actually, I think, the second time in a row because I did a couple of these palm drafts before just on my phone for my own leisure. And I think this is the second time in a row that I've done this exact running back room of Nick Chubb, Najee Harris, Miles Sanders, James Conner going early with the running backs. But now I'm covered. It's 2 running backs and a flex. So I'm with these 4. I feel like I don't have to draft running backs for the rest of this draft. And then I doubled up with Evan Ingram. It just makes a nice, easy stack with Trevor Lawrence. And then best ball, it's, wide receiver is king. So now when we do eventually get back on the board, we're just going to be going straight into wide receiver territory. So we haven't really, I've been ignoring the board because I've been talking a lot about just, it's almost, I should have just done a regular episode without the draft board, but it's fun to have, I guess, something to look at besides just my pretty face.
He runs to the 40. The guy is drunk, but there he goes. The 20. They're chasing him. They're not going to get him. Waving his arms. Bare chested. Somebody stop that man. Here comes the 50.
Oh, so basically after I went, let's just look here. See if there, instead of going through the whole board, I'll just see anything that sticks out. So Kyle Pitts, I mentioned, I am not buying in on him really, but his ADP is at least reasonable this year, so that's good. DeAndre Swift, I'm a believer in DeAndre Swift, even though, I mean, everyone's like, oh, Jalen Hurts doesn't check down, but it's like the whole point. I think people forget that this is going to be like my catchphrase for this episode. I think people forget. One of the things that I feel like gets overlooked is the whole point of like when you're a quarterback and you progress, it's you start sometimes doing things that you maybe weren't doing before. Generally speaking, for a quarterback, one of those things is eventually you do start to check the ball down more. Josh Allen's probably, they've talked, there's been whispers over the off season that he's going to run the ball less. And part of that is, it's not necessarily running the ball less, but it's just knowing the difference of when to run the ball versus when it's better to check down. Sometimes, it makes more sense. And especially someone like a Josh Allen or a Jalen Hurts, when you fake the run, you do that bootleg, you draw coverage. And so if you have the running back behind that coverage, well, it makes more sense to dump it off to the running back because that can turn into a big play. So it's just managing the game and using the weapons around you. And generally speaking, in year 1, year 2, you're just trying to manage getting the play call in and out. You're trying to manage first and second read. And if you're a running quarterback, it's usually read 1, read 2, take off on the run. And as you progress, as you become more aware and become more comfortable in the system, and again, this is assuming that your system is not changing every single year. And that's another big thing that I think gets too often overlooked is, this idea that we can just tag players as inefficient or bust when their offensive coordinator has changed 3 times in 3 years, like, with Mac Jones currently, or we saw that with Daniel Jones, who do I draft? No, I got to take some wide receivers. We're hurting for wide receivers. We're going to take Tyler Boyd. He's just so consistent for like a spot start. And do we take Juju here? I'm not in love with it. You know what? We're gonna finish off our tight end room, and then we don't even have to look at tight end for the rest of this draft. We're just gonna take Freiermuth because I love the Muth. I think he can finish top 5, and then putting Muth and Ingram together just makes me feel like I can just ignore tight end for the rest of the draft. So we can even just take that out. Actually, we can even take out running backs for right now because we've got the 4 horsemen and Nicholas Chubb, Najee Harris, Miles Sanders, and James Conner. Apologies to James Conner. James Conner is gonna be a value. He's like the only game in town right now. I mean, I understand Hollywood Brown is there, but like it's James Conner season. Oh, definitely need more wide receiver and probably need one more quarterback.
I think we need one more. I think we need one more. All right, we'll get one more.
Let's go check in on the draft board here. Now we get down into these nitty gritty rounds. Khalil Herbert, Rashad Penny. Look, I love Rashad Penny as much as the next person, but there's some guys that just never stay healthy, and unfortunately, he is one of those players. So he will hit for a couple games this season. I don't hate it this late, but I have trouble drafting him even in best ball, knowing that he won't be available at some point. Elijah Mitchell I'm only drafting Elijah Mitchell if I also took CMC. Spot starter Zay Jones. I like Alan Lazard because he's the only one that's essentially continuing on in the same offense. I think he's going to be a nice red zone target. The Jets tight ends is like Tyler Conklin and apologies to whoever else it is, but it's basically Conklin and it's like Allen. When I look at a team that doesn't have a true tight end target per se, a lot of times the big body wide receiver on that same team will operate in a similar fashion. So that's why I also really like Adam Thielen for the Panthers. Not that he's like a huge body or anything, but Thielen's always been like route running and getting open in the end zone. Those are like the two things that he does very well. Those two things also carry over with age, generally speaking. I think with the fresh start in Carolina, it's going to invigorate him at the beginning of the season, especially. Kirk Cousins. So Kirk Cousins is such an interesting case, and I am not drafting Kirk Cousins this year at all. Even though I think Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback in real life, even though I like Kirk Cousins as a human being, even though Kirk Cousins is set up with a bad defense, fantastic offensive weapons in the air, and essentially nobody to compete with them. I'm just going to draft my two guys here, make sure I get them. So we'll take Rashee Rice because he's getting positive reports. And if any wide receiver that can hit for Kansas City would be phenomenal. And then, like I mentioned, I'll take Adam Thielen because I think he's going to be reinvigorated having gone to a new team. And especially at the beginning of the season, I think he'll have some spike weeks with some touchdowns because Bryce Young, as he's easing into the NFL, he's going to look for a veteran presence in the red zone, especially. So that's where I'm looking at Adam Thielen. Whatever I was talking about before, I've completely lost my train of thought. So apologies for that. That thought is dead and buried now. Let's go back to the draft board here. Tank Bigsby, Jalen Warren. I'm not a Jalen Warren truther. I don't think that's gonna affect Najee Harris in any way, shape, or form. Steelers are gonna Steeler. That's what they do. Steelers are gonna load Najee with 350, 400 touches, and whatever Najee doesn't get, Jalen Warren will get the rest. And people will complain and be exasperated, and Jalen Warren looks so much better. Yeah, of course, Jalen Warren looks so much better after Najee carries it 8 to 10 times. Pounds on the defense, makes everyone tired, and then Jalen Warren gets to come in like a fresh jitterbug. It's like Jalen Warren is not going to carry the ball 25 to 30 times. Stop it. Taysom Hill still getting drafted at tight end is hilarious. The Saints just won't let that go. On it, I don't even think it helps their team, to be perfectly honest. I guess he does have like that Jalen Hurts effect of Taysom Hill's good for like the quarterback sneak, but it's just such a ridiculous concept to have like a quarterback that's actually listed as a tight end. But I mean, he gets the job done. He's going to have those spike weeks if he is used the same way. So I get it in best ball, especially like this late. It's a hack. I definitely would prefer him in the weekly winners though, because then it's like on those weeks where he has those crazy weeks, it's like those are the spike weeks that you would really want compared to, it's like if he gives you 3 weeks out of in this format where it's like you're kind of more accruing on a season long thing, I don't like him as much. But I mean, this late, any tight end doing literally anything at all would be awesome. Sorry for that little roll off there. Unless you really want to hear a bunch of squeaking from my co-star Rocky here. Matthew Stafford's an interesting case. I think the Rams are being overlooked completely. Now granted, even if I looked it up, it would take me forever to find it. There's an account on Twitter, and I apologize because I cannot remember the name right now, and I wish I could so that I could respectfully tell them that whatever analytical system that they've built that's powering their win-loss predictor for teams in the NFL this year is a pile of garbage. This is the thing about like analytics that drives me crazy. It's like, look, analytics is an accoutrement. It's an accompaniment. It's not meant to override history and how football works on like a human and intangible level. And at the end of the day, there's no analytics that are ever going to account for that. And again, this goes back to why should running backs be paid? Because of those intangible aspects that are too often overlooked and not talked about, where it's like the fact that you're carrying the ball 300 to 400 times in a season means that you are carrying a workload that is surpassing every other skill player like 3 to 4 times as much. Like the highest targeted wide receiver in the league is going to get 200 targets, and so you're doubling up essentially on the top wide receiver if you get 400 touches, especially if you're the type like a Najee Harris or or like a Derrick Henry. Actually, last year he upped his receiving game more than people think, and even that gets overlooked. You look at players like that where they're getting 300 to 400 touches, and it's the intangibles of what that does for your team. So there's two things intangibly. I mean, there's more than two, but two really big aspects is when you have that dependability of a workhorse running back, where it's like they can do the 3 yards and a cloud of dust in between the tackles. First of all, that wears on a defense, so that yes, other players that are jitterbug fast, that are spark plug players, they get to look better in those systems and in that offense when the defense is tired. So the fact that a premier running back is wearing down a defense like body shots in a boxing match to the point that you then get that knockout shot, it's like it didn't just come from that one knockout shot. It came from setting it up with the body blows. And you can argue that you can get any running back to replace those body blows, but that's not true. There's very few running backs that are doing the body blow in between the tackle running, that are also excellent in pass blocking, that are also out there doing receiving work, that are essentially contributing to every aspect of the game. And that dependability, that reliability, that character becomes something that the rest of the team looks to, and kind of they mold and they join and they form behind that presence, that leader. That's why so many times through history we've seen like the premier running back position be a galvanizing factor for teams, even teams that had good quarterbacks. The running back galvanizes a team in a way that is too often overlooked. And the other aspect is how they invigorate a team, and that's, you look at highlights from the past. So you can talk about it from a highlight perspective. You can talk about it from how the teams rely on those highlights. How many times have the Seahawks rolled the Marshawn Lynch beast mode run against the Saints? How many times have we seen running back highlights through history from guys like Barry Sanders and the like? And that's, that is what fans want to see and really at the end of the day pay for. So the way that, and when you hit a run like that beast mode run, when you hit the long touchdown run, even more, almost as much, and even a lot of times more so than a pass, because of the physical factor. When you talk about like the beast mode run, for example, like the way that he's like throwing dudes off, the way that invigorates your team, the way that charges up your defense, like that is again an overlooked factor that is so important to the team chemistry. And yes, obviously having an elite quarterback overrides everything else. So when you look at these graphics that people are putting out of like, oh, the last 10 to 15 Super Bowl champions, like they all had, cheap running backs, basically. First of all, you look at that list, most, if not all of the list, had either elite quarterbacks or they had really good quarterbacks that when they got to the playoffs turned it up and played at an elite level. So you're talking about Joe Flacco and Eli Manning, essentially. So it's like, yes, elite quarterback at the NFL level, which is a passing game and has been essentially since, the mid 70s to late 80s, and has only gotten more and more so towards that aspect of the game. It doesn't mean that, it doesn't mean that the running back, the workhorse running back, should just be ignored now and devalued to the degree that it has been. And I think it's a combination of a bad CBA and its ownership. It always comes down to, if the owners really wanted to fix it, they definitely could, but they choose not to. And so, you know, uh, it's definitely like all of these different factors playing together. It's all these different layers, but to just act like, well, statistics and analytics, like, and I get it. It's like, I was in an argument with someone online, and this argument lasted for days across many feeds and will probably continue to last for many days and many weeks and many years, even. But um, essentially, the argument came down to Marshawn Lynch's value in the Super Bowl and whether or not they would have, like, yeah, I think everyone is like, yeah, if they would have just handed it to Marshawn instead of throwing the ball in that situation, probably win that football game. And you can argue the other side of it of like, well, it was obvious they were going to run, and they could have easily stopped it, and that. Marshawn Lynch galvanized that team in a way that even the Legion of Boom looked to Marshawn and played better when Marshawn was on. And when it came down to that moment of, this is it, this is the whole season, comes down to literally one play. It's 1 yard on the goal line. Who are we going to give it to? You give it to your heart and soul of your team guy, and that was Marshawn Lynch, and that's what he represented to the Seahawks team, organization, and fans at that moment in time. Maybe not the organization, like when I talk about like the higher ups, but like the coaching that year. And so we are almost on the clock here. We've basically ignored backup quarterback because I'm very comfortable with Darnold. I didn't really feel like I needed a backup, but we will take one because he is going to have a bye week. We're going to stay right in the same division with it, assuming Slaughterhouse doesn't steal them from us. But Slaughterhouse already has UPGs, so yeah, I figured it was safe. Ryan Tannehill, nice easy decision there, and we've got a lot of wide receivers now, but we'll still add one more. I like Darius Slayton coming off a 700-yard season. And, Darius Slayton and Isaiah Hodgins at least present as outside wide receivers compared to the litany of slot receivers that the Giants seem intent on having on their roster, including recent addition Cole Beasley, who they literally signed out of retirement. It's like, what's next? Is Julian Edelman going to come back, put the cleats on? You're going to go back and get Wes Welker now? What the heck's going on? We're in the very deepest parts of the draft here. Hunter Henry, that's one I feel like gets overlooked too much. He's still out there in New England. I just did this actually in the Palm 2 that I had done right before this one. Was I took Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki at the very, very end with like two of my last picks, basically, because the two of them combined are essentially one wide receiver. We are already done. Wow, that was a fast one. You would have thought this was the fast puppy, but no, it's the Palm. Puka Nakua. I love Puka Nakua. He might be my favorite name this year. Just so I just love saying Puka Nakua. I hope he scores touchdowns this year. That'll be the most fun, is if you see him on red zone and he scores a touchdown. Puka Nakua. I'm an idiot, I know. Mapletron, Chase Claypool. Man, I really love Chase Claypool. Like as a player, I was really hoping he would hit with the Steelers. That was one of my misses. I traded for him in Dynasty, and I've since offloaded him. Now, granted, I did like a whole thing, and again, this is where draft picks, trade strategy, throw in draft picks. Draft picks are complete BS. First of all, especially like whenever I see trades with like 2025, like the year 2025 draft picks, I'm like, you have no idea what's going to happen in 2 years. You don't know the draft class coming out. You don't know how your league's going to finish. You don't know where that draft is going to be. It's so ridiculous to me that anyone is like trading like legit assets this year for a chance to draft someone 2 years from now. Like, that's insane to me. But even next year, 2024, I just always assume my team is going to do well. I'm never going into the season like, well, this team is piddly crap and it's going to be in the bottom. Like, unless it's a team I took over and I'm like looking at the roster, like, what did the last guy do to this? Like, for the most part, like, if I drafted the team, uh, even it's like even if I drafted 2 3 years ago, for the most part, like generally speaking, my teams are always like in win now, compete mode, and so those draft picks, I end up just always kicking down the road because they're going to be late round picks anyways, and I turn them into current assets, and then just keep my team always in win now mode. So, yeah, all that to say, Chase Claypool, I traded him. I think it was Chase Claypool, Deonta Foreman, my first and my third. And I got back Stephon Diggs in a fourth. And it's like, yeah, I would much rather have Stephon Diggs than have to hold Chase Claypool and Deonta Foreman all year just to have my first round pick next year so that I can maybe draft someone that would be even remotely as close as Stephon Diggs. Or I could just have Stephon Diggs this year. Like, what are we doing? Like, and I get it. It's like people, the media around, well, Diggs is 29 and he's been upset with the Bills and he can move on. And but look, this year they're going for it. And this year I'm going for it. I've got Mahomes, Kelsey, stack. I've got Lamar, Superflex. I've got now my wide receiver room, Stephon Diggs, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Beat that 16-team Dynasty League. And I still have Derrick Henry, who I traded for last year because, again, people are, oh, he's old. He's going to bust. Just went for 1,500 yards last year. Just, added receiving to his game where he had the most receptions, most yards he's had in his career, and was actually secretly like very good on yards after the catch. Like, it just blows my mind. So I have him and I have Cam Akers. Those are my two primary running backs. I'm very thin in terms of depth. This team has virtually no depth. But the depth I have is very important because, again, it's like, so for example, the backup quarterbacks I have are Tyler Huntley and Anthony Brown. It's like, okay, I'm covered for Lamar. Mahomes, I'm like, Mahomes going to play 17 every year, basically. If he doesn't, I'm screwed anyways. There's no backup to Mahomes that even remotely replaces him, where Tyler Huntley at least gives you a facsimile of production as compared to Lamar Jackson. So I've got that locked up. I've got Kyron Williams, who is, I really liked him coming out of Notre Dame. When I look at these rookies, because oftentimes I'm taking picks in the rounds 3, 4 of dynasty leagues, and these are often deep dynasty leagues where it's like 12 to 16 teams. So that third or fourth round is really like the fourth and non-existent round, like undrafted players in other leagues. So I'm really like, when you get down to that, it's like I tend to go for character guys. So I tend to take guys that are just, they're known to have good character. They're known to be hardworking guys because, when you get to the rounds 5 to 7, like a lot of times those are the type of guys that are more likely to make it compared to other people getting picked or undrafted in that same range. So we'll go recap quickly here. Go to completed. Here we go. Palm 2. I've already got 3 entries. We can actually take a look at my other two teams very fast too, and you guys in the comments let me know which of these 3 Pomeranian teams that you would prefer to have. So this is the one that we just drafted. We've got Trevor Lawrence and Ryan Tannehill. We've got Nick Chubb, Najee Harris, Miles Sanders, James Conner, and Chuba Hubbard. Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Tyler Boyd. It does get a little bit thin there, but I like the upside of Rashee Rice and Jaden Reed. I think Adam Thielen is a nice veteran floor. And we've got some random upside hopeful picks later in John Mechie, Hunter Renfrow, Darius Slayton. And I love the tight end room. Ingram and Pat Freiermuth are 2 of my highest rated tight ends this year. They're 2 of my sleeper tight ends. Usually if I don't get Freiermuth, I want Ingram. Same way as if I don't get Najee, I want ETN. If I don't get the Muth, I want Ingram. So I like that stack with T-Law and Ingram as well. So that's a nice little team. This was the one I had done right before. So yes, the exact same running backs. Nick Chubb, Najee Harris, Miles Sanders, James Conner, and then throw in Devin Singletary. And then with Daniel Jones and Aaron Rodgers. Trey Lance, I took in with my very last pick. Garrett Wilson stacks with Rodgers. Drake London. Out of the sophomore receivers, besides Chris Olave, whose ADP is much higher, when you get down to Drake London, Christian Watson, Treylon Burks, out of those 3, even though I have taken a lot of Watson as well, his ADP's risen a little bit to where now I prefer Drake London. So I've been taking a lot of Drake London. And we took Tyler Lockett. I haven't taken a lot of him, but he's a reliable player. So he's always cracking his ADP. So took Lockett. And then I really like Zay Flowers. I believe the reports coming out of camp, they're already saying he's the best wide receiver in camp, even over Odell Beckham. I don't know that he's necessarily the best wide receiver, but I do know that he has the opportunity to definitely be the primary. I see him as more of the kind of guy that's going to take short routes long versus, the kind of guy that needs to catch the ball deep. So we'll kind of see what happens there. And then I essentially punted on tight end for this team. So I took Dalton Schultz and then I comboed up Mike Gesicki and Hunter Henry to basically just have Patriots tight end. So I actually think I might like this team a little bit more because I feel like the wide receivers are a little bit stronger. That's what we get. This one we went with the tight ends in the middle rounds. And then this one was the very first one I did. I went Justin Herbert, Jared Goff for my quarterbacks. Jonathan Taylor, Najee Harris, and Travis Etienne. They were both there for me, so I had to double tap Najee Harris and Etienne together. And then for upside, I took A-Shane, who I'm really high on. I love his speed. I love the opportunity in that system with Mike McDaniel. Ty Chandler. Ty Chandler is someone I'm starting to take a lot of really late in drafts because, it's not for sure that Alexander Mattison has a lock on that job. And even if he does, there's going to be a backup that has value in Minnesota. I'm starting to think it's going to be Ty Chandler. He hasn't really done much in his career, but I was looking it up and he has sub 4.5 speed, which I think stands out from the rest of the pack there in Minnesota. So I really think Ty Chandler could end up carving out a role. Keep an eye out in training camps and preseason to see if Ty Chandler starts getting a little bit of buzz. And then I'm not scared off of Treylon Burks at all. I actually think DeAndre Hopkins signing helps Treylon Burks because I think Burks, part of the struggle was that he was the only wide receiver that was in town. And so he was the only person they had to cover, basically. I do not think DeAndre Hopkins is cooked the way that, Unfortunately, Julio Jones is more towards the tail end of his career. A lot of the veteran wide receivers, which is the joke that the Titans sign above 30 wide receivers all the time. I think Nuke is different. He's like he reminds me of like an Anquan Bolden, where it's not necessarily the speed, it's the route running, it's the catch ability, the ability to go up for the ball, the hands, especially Nuke. His hands are incredible, and I don't think he just lost his hands. So I like Treylon Burke still. Took Quentin Johnston to stack with Herbert, Michael Thomas. If Michael Thomas stays healthy, that's just such a value pick. Now, I don't know that he does. It's been 2 years. But, I took a potential veteran upside because I had already taken Quentin Johnson, and then I ended up taking Rashee Rice. I'm taking a lot of Rashee Rice lately just because I had seen some positive reports on him at a camp. And it's wide open there in Kansas City as far as the wide receivers. It's just pick the one you like. Kadarius Toney is the actual best wide receiver. Unfortunately, he's just never been able to stay healthy. If he does, he's easily the best one, but his ADP usually is a little higher than I'm willing to take, given that I've never seen him stay healthy in his entire career. And then John Mechie, I just love his story, so I ended up taking a lot of him. Wan'Dale Robinson, took one of the slot receivers. I think Wan'Dale, though, I tend to ignore Sterling Shepard, and I think Wan'Dale presents as a truer actual slot receiver compared to Jalen Hyatt, who's more of a speed burner that I think actually, even though he will maybe want to work out of the slot, I see Jalen Hyatt as more of a 4 wide receiver set where he's working inside out, where a lot of times it's he's using that burner speed more downfield. Whereas Wan'Dale is more of the phone booth agility type slot receiver, more of the, very on a dime route running. So I think he actually has the potential, and again, it's injuries got him last year. We'll see if he can develop in Puka Nakua. I already said, I just love saying his name, so I take a lot of him. And the Muth, I think he could finish top 5. I took Sam Laporta for the upside, and because it paired with Goff, and then I also paired Gerald Everett with Justin Herbert. As always, underdog, just the projections I get for a lot of these teams, they just seem to really hate my drafts. I don't know why they don't like what I do or something. Maybe it's because I didn't take enough of the wide receivers here. I feel like that was the big difference here was they like the wide receivers a lot. So I do think this was probably the best team. But like I said in the comments, go ahead, let me know. Team Trevor Lawrence, Team Daniel Jones, or Team Justin Herbert. Which one would you roll with? As always, thank you so much for joining me. Catch you all on the flip side.
50. He runs to the 40. The guy is drunk, but there he goes. The 20. They're chasing him. They're not going to get him. Waving his arms, bare-chested. Somebody stop that man. Here comes